Okay, so for number 6, we are still using the diagram to the right for this problem. In this example, they're telling us that DF bisects angle EDG. And if we're looking at the picture, EDG is the outside angle, and DF is bisecting it. So remember, whenever you see the word bisects, it's cutting it in half. So this DF cut that angle in half, meaning that these two angles are the same measurement. So we know that angle EDF equals angle FDG. Once we know that, we can look at the information they give us, and they tell us the measure of EDF is 6x minus 12, so we can replace that over here. And then they also tell us that FDG is 3x plus 24, so we're going to replace that on the right side. Then you can use this equation to solve for x, and once you have that, you are going to plug that x value back in to solve for what both angles equal. They should equal the same because it was a bisector. And then we're going to figure out what EDG is. So go ahead and try to solve for x. Plug x into both expressions to figure out what they equal. And then you're going to figure out what the entire angle equals. For number 8, this one you are going to want to draw a picture because they don't give you one. And in this one, they said M is between points L and N. So the first thing you're going to want to do is draw that visual. We can do a segment, and it says M is in the middle. L and N can go on either side, doesn't matter. Then looking at what they tell us, that LM is 4x minus 4. So I'm going to go ahead and label that on the picture. And the next part, LMN, is 3x plus 24. Now we have the visual and we know what every part is represented by. Next, LN, the whole thing, so from L all the way over to N, this is going to be 14x minus 8. What we are looking for is the length of MN. In order to figure that out, we first need to solve for x. So for this one, we are going to be using the segment addition postulate. And for the segment addition postulate, we're talking about one part of the segment plus the second part of the segment is going to be equal to the whole segment. So for this one, we're going to have part, and then this is the whole at the bottom. Once we know that, we can go ahead and write the equation for x minus 4 plus 3x plus 24, and that is going to be equal to the whole thing, which is 14x minus 8. Once you have that set up, you're going to solve the equation for x, and then you're going to plug it into what mn equals. So up here, we just need this one part. So whatever you get for x, you're going to plug it in and solve, and that will be your answer. If we look at the second page, for 13 and 14, we're using the endpoint and midpoint M of a segment to find the coordinates of the other endpoint. For this one, there's two different ways that you could do it. The first way is using the midpoint formula, which we used in class. where the midpoint would be where you're adding those two x coordinate points together. And then you're dividing them by 2 to find your midpoint coordinate. So for this one, we know A is -1 and 3. B, we don't know what that is, so we are looking for this x and y value. And the midpoint, which they told us, is 3, 1. So if we set up the midpoint formula, we know that -1 plus the x value divided by 2, and we also know that 3 plus y divided by 2 is going to give us our midpoint. So looking at our midpoint, this first part has to be equal to the x coordinate. So we know -1 plus x divided by 2 is going to be equal to 3. And then we also need to find our y coordinate. In this one, we can have 3 plus y divided by 2, and that's going to be equal to 1. So we would solve these equations by multiplying both sides by 2. Those simplify, and we would be left with -1 plus x equals 6. Then we can add both sides. I'm just going to make this all a little bit smaller so we have room. Okay, so then we can add the 1 to both sides, and we get x equals 7. So for coordinate point B, we know the x value is 7. So then you can go ahead, solve the second equation we set up to figure out what the y coordinate would be. If you feel like that is something you are struggling with, there's one other way that we can do this. So we know we're talking about a midpoint. We can draw a segment and put the midpoint in the middle and the two endpoints on the side. We can fill in what we know, so we know that point C is -2, -3, and we know the midpoint is -4, 2. We're looking for what our D value is. So if we start and we look at our x's, from C to the midpoint, we went from -2 to -4. So we subtracted 2 to get to the midpoint. Because these distances between C and M and D are the same, we would have to subtract the same number from the midpoint to get to point D. So -4 minus 2 will bring us to -6. Then we can look at our y values. We're at -3. To get over to the midpoint, we go up to 2. So that would be like adding 5. -3 plus 5 is 2. So then to get to our other endpoint, because this is the same distance, we can add 5 again to get our second coordinate point. And the missing coordinate point that we are looking for is -6, 7. Both of these methods will get you to the correct answer. Whichever one you prefer, you can use. Okay. For number 15, remember midpoint means it's in the middle. And they've already shown on this picture that these two segments are congruent. So if they're congruent, it means their measurements are equal. So we can set up that equation, solve for x, and then we're going to use our x value to find the missing measurement they want. So this one is MQ, so we would just plug in our x value into that expression, and that'll tell us what MQ equals. For number 16, in the figure to the right, they tell us that the measure of angle RST, so that's going from R to S and S to T, that whole thing is 134 degrees. So I'm just going to show that over here so I can remember that. they want us to find the measure of QST, and that is that smaller angle over here. In order to figure out what that angle measurement is, we're going to have to solve for x first. And this one, we're going to use the angle addition postulate. So for this one, it's very similar to the segment one, where we're going to take part plus part, and that's going to be equal to the whole. So we have our part here, part there, and our whole. So we're going to substitute all of that into our equation, solve for x, and then plug it into the angle QST to figure out what it equals. Just a few more problems on the second page. For number 17, two angles form a right angle. And this one, again, doesn't give us a picture, so we can draw that. So we have two smaller angles, and they form a right angle. The measure of one angle is 5 times greater than the measure of the other angle. So if I make this angle just x, the other one would be 5 times greater than this, so we're just going to make this one 5x. This one, we're going to use the same process we used in number 6. We're going to take the part plus part and put that equal to the whole. So this one, we would just have x plus 5x equals 90 because we were told that this is a right angle. Once you figure out what x is, substitute it in, and you can find both angle measurements. For number 18, the two angles form a straight angle. Okay, so again, we're going to draw a visual. Doesn't matter if the visual is accurate, as long as it tells us or shows us we have a straight angle that is formed by two other angles. Okay, then the measure of one angle is 6 more than twice the measure of the other. So we're going to represent this is angle that we're going to represent with x. And then the measure of the other angle is 6 more, so that means we're going to be adding 6, then twice the measure of the other angle. And twice means we're multiplying it by 2, so we would have 2x plus 6. And again, we're going to use the part plus the part equals the whole for our angle addition postulate. So we're going to take those two parts, add them together, and put it equal to 180 degrees. Once you have that, you can solve for x, and that will show you how, or give you the information you need to find both of the angles. For number 19, we're going to draw angle ABC. Remember, when you're labeling the angle, you need to have the points there representing each part. So A, B, and C are all points that are on the angle. Now they want us to show that BD is a bisector of ABC. Remember, bisector means it cuts it in half. So now we have a bisector on there, but they want us to show that it's bisector. So in order to do that, we're just going to put the arcs down here, telling us that those two angles are congruent. And that's enough information to say that BD is a bisector. Okay, now number 20. We are going to write an equation of a line that goes through the point 3, -5. So we know the point 3, -5 and is perpendicular to y equals 3x minus 4. So this is what we went over on Friday. So remember, we have slope-intercept form. The number in front of x is our slope. So we know the regular slope is equal to 3. The perpendicular slope, remember, is the opposite sign. So our original slope was 3. Our perpendicular slope is going to be negative. And then we find the reciprocal. So 3 is like the same thing as having 3 over 1. So we're going to flip that over and it'll become negative 1/3 for our perpendicular slope. Now remember, the first step in doing these is to find the slope, which we did. We know our new slope is negative 1/3. Step 2, we're going to do some substitution. In the equation y equals mx plus b, we're going to plug in everything we know. So we know that m is negative 1/3, and we're going to use this point that the line goes through, and we're going to plug that in for our x and our y. And when we do that, we're going to get negative 5 equals negative 1/3 times 3 plus b. Then our next step, we need to solve for our y-intercept of b. So we would take negative 1/3 times 3. Remember, you take the top number times the whole number. So we would have negative 5 equals negative 3 over 3 plus b. And negative 3 over 3 we can simplify to negative 1. Our goal was to get the b value by itself. So we would get b equals negative 4. And remember, that's not our last step. Our last step is to write the equation. So now we know what m and b equals. Our final answer should have the y value in there. So we're going to have y equals negative 1/3 x minus 4. And that is our answer. I hope this helps with most of your questions. And then remember, tomorrow in class, we are going to go through some more. And don't forget, you can check your answers on the answer.